Hello, everyone. Welcome in. In this video, we will be discussing jury selection day one in the Richard Allen Delphi trial. There is no recording of any kind and no audio transcripts will be available to the public. All of the information that we are able to gather is from those who are allowed to report and get spots inside the courtroom. Luckily enough, there are two attorneys on YouTube who will be going to this trial and hopefully get seats every day so that we can get the amount of information that we were able to gather from day one of this trial. Just some quick input from my perspective. It is extremely concerning that we are not able to get information other than information relayed to us by people who are attending the trial. I do think because of all of the extenuating circumstances surrounding this particular trial and this particular defendant, it would be wise that cameras would be allowed in the courtroom for transparency, which I believe the American public does have the right to have. I kind of feel like we are being disrespected, for lack of a better term, with how this trial is playing out, especially with the crime that was committed. We do have to remember that there are two very young girls who were the victims of the alleged crimes of Richard Allen, and I must reiterate here, I have made a video before, that I do not believe that the evidence that is going to be presented against Richard Allen is enough for him to be named the defendant in this case. So I feel extremely sad on two different fronts. Number one, I think an innocent person is being put on trial. And number two, I don't believe true justice is being found for these victims. Please understand that my reporting does come with this bias. I'm not apologetic for how I feel about this defendant. Anyone who knows my channel knows that I am very pro-justice. We mainly cover the Alexei Treviso case here, and we are really hoping for justice for the victim in that case. In this case, I don't believe that this is justice, and I think we will get to that throughout this trial. We do know that the defense has had their hands tied with the evidence that they are allowed to present, which is some of the strongest evidence in the defendant's favor, in my opinion. So I do think that the defense is already starting out with an extremely unfair trial. With all this being said, I'm going to try and get all of the facts out that I heard from specifically Lawyer Lee's recap of day one for this trial. So we will begin by reiterating there is no recording of any kind. All technology is to be removed by attendees, including phones, smartwatches, and spy glasses. Yes, they even went as far as to include the new technology of glasses that can record audio and video. Both sides, the prosecutor and the defense, are giving kind of like mini opening statements, as it's been described by Lawyer Lee, to each different panel of jurors that comes in for their selection. It appears as though the prosecution was hitting home on the points that Richard Allen was a rich guy, that they have the bullet, and that this was a brutal murder. She said that there was no hint as to the missing belongings by the victims that connected Richard Allen to the victims, but they did mention the markings on the bullet, which, as many people know, is not really scientifically backed. That type of ballistics evidence is not very strong evidence. So just having this bullet with markings on it that could resemble markings that came from a weapon inside Richard Allen's home is extremely shaky. The defense apparently wanted to get in front of the multiple confessions that were made by the defendant and to show the multiple wrongs that were done by those investigating and law enforcement in this crime. Now, the jurors in this case apparently will have a very, very big job to do, not only for deciding the fate of Richard Allen, but the jurors that are selected will be bused from Fort Wayne to Carroll County, and they will be sequestered there for the entirety of the trial, about a month in total. That is pretty wild and crazy to most everyone who hears about this, because that's not the typical way that jurors are dealt with in a case. That is extremely rare. It's not common that jurors are bussed away from their home for such an extended period of time to deal with the potential jury pool that they had to select from, and how everyone in the local area obviously was affected by the crime in and of itself. So they were not a jury pool that could be selected. Still, it is pretty wild to think that these jurors will be away from their homes for about a month and that they will be solely focused on this case. Now, we do not know the information gathered by the jury questionnaires, but we do know right now that there are 12 jurors sat with 2 alternates, in total 8 women and 6 men. Without the alternates, it is 7 women and 5 men on the actual jury for now. And so far, 52 jurors have been seen. The jurors were given lunch, but the attorneys worked straight through the day. We are looking for 12 total jurors plus 4 alternates. It's suspected that the jury will be sat by tomorrow. Sets of 12 jurors at a time were moved from the gallery into the jury box and were asked preliminary questions by the judge, and then were asked questions by the prosecution and the defense for both 30-minute time periods, so about a little over an hour of questioning for each group of 12 jurors. Many had heard about the case. Most did not say that they had an opinion on the case. Some people, such as a caregiver and a single mother with a 1-year-old, were not picked. A single mother with a 3-year-old was picked as a juror. It was reported by lawyer Lee that the prosecution did well with the jury. The prosecution apparently spent $4,000 on a jury consultant, and it must have paid off. Only the lead attorney spoke with the potential jurors. One of the prosecution's questions to the potential jurors was, why do they believe that the prosecutor was an attorney, and what evidence they would need to believe something like that? Which leads us to believe that they are counting on people on the jury to essentially rely on circumstantial evidence rather than direct evidence, and to see how many people they can get on the jury that will just simply believe what they're told without asking a lot of questions. I don't believe that that bodes well for the amount of evidence that the prosecution thinks that they have in this case. I think it lets us know that they do not have a lot of direct evidence against Richard Allen. It was also reported that the defense did well and got stronger throughout the day. They cycled through all 3 of the attorneys on the case, and the one miss that the defense had when questioning someone on the jury was asking basically why would someone willingly go to the police unless they were trying to help. And the answer that the potential juror gave was that I guess that they could be trying to throw the police off with that. And then that question was apparently not asked again. So from there, they do seem to want to get in front of all of these confessions that were made by Richard Allen while he was locked up before trial. They wanted to know jurors' reasons for possibly confessing to a crime that you did not commit. Some of the answers were extremely promising for the defense, such as mental health, possibly wanting something to be over, and an answer by someone who had depression themselves, which Richard Allen also suffers from, saying that maybe if someone just kept repeating that until it could break the person down. So just to reiterate, these were all possible reasons for why these jurors could believe someone could make confessions to something they didn't do, which is extremely huge for the confessions that were made by Richard Allen, because personally, in my opinion, I did say I'd be giving my opinion in this, I believe that all the confessions that Richard Allen made were due to the extreme circumstances he was being held in. He was being held in prison before his trial, which is extremely rare. I know that some very serious offenders in some circumstances do call for people to be held in prison rather than jail before trial. But again, very rare, very odd, wasn't really, it was kind of odd that it was even happening in this trial. And not only was he in prison, but he was allegedly kept in solitary confinement with lights on for extended periods of time, which is, I guess, in my opinion, tantamount to something that could maybe break the Geneva Convention. I don't know, but I just, it bugs me to know that someone who has not been proven guilty was being treated as such. And allegedly, we might get to see some of the treatment of Richard Allen and the circumstances he was subjected to, which I think would greatly help the jury's opinion about these confessions. The prosecution apparently asked a question via a snowman metaphor, essentially saying if you had a snowman in your front yard, you leave and come back, and there is a puddle of water. Would you believe it's a snowman who melted? Would you believe that it's a snowman who melted with the twigs and the coal and the nose and the hat and all the stuff that would be in the puddle? Can you assume that the snowman melted and that that's why the snowman's gone and that there's a puddle with all the snowman stuff in it? Some people could say yes. Some people could say no. But there was a winning defense rebuttal to that kind of question when they basically said Who cares if a snowman melted? That is an inconsequential metaphor. It's an inconsequential thing to pontificate about. We're talking about if this guy murdered someone or not, and that is the seriousness with which you need to consider the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. And from how it was reported, it seemed as though the jurors, within the potential jurors, were on board with that. They were, not pushing back against that from how it seemed. As you could probably gather from all the different metaphors and things that the prosecution tried, they were essentially getting at this question that was essentially hilariously responded to by a potential juror. If the prosecution has their way, this person will likely be struck because this answer was not great for them. Essentially, the prosecutor was saying, if you just have these, dead bodies, these victims, do you need the weapon or do you need DNA? Do you need CSI level evidence to know what happened here? And the response by the potential juror was, well, if you don't have a weapon or DNA, you better have something, which I thought was one of the most hopeful things that we heard throughout this day, other than the statement made by Lawyer Lee, who did get to have eyes on defendant Richard Allen after all we have seen, all the images of him after being in solitary confinement and held in prison before his trial, where he looked very disheveled, in my opinion, on the brink of death. He just looked horrible. Allegedly, he looks much better. He doesn't look like that at all, which I do give credit to, having been transferred finally out of the prison that the, guards were wearing odorist patches in, and where he was being held in solitary confinement with the lights on all the time. I think that would have a considerable impact on not only your physical health, but your mental health. And I do think hopefully that will lead to the jury seeing and believing that his mental health was seriously impacted when he made those confessions. I just personally do not think Richard Allen is the man for the crime. It was, reported today by people who saw Richard Allen how small he truly is. He's allegedly about 5'4", which is a very, very small man. No offense to guys who are out there, but that is a very small man to have overpowered and taken two victims and done the crime that he did. It just isn't adding up. The bullet that was allegedly found under their bodies that has alleged markings that are matching the gun from Richard Allen's home just makes no sense to me. And my final thought is, I truly hope that the whole reason that this is being able to play out how it is, and all of the, in my opinion, possible corruption that has been shown by the judge in this case, as you will have seen on the screen, Judge Frances C. Gold is her name. I know I'm supposed to respect judges. I don't really have respect for her. I do not think she's handled herself with decorum throughout this case. And so I am not going to be showing her any favors or any respect. It is my personal hope and opinion that there is possibly some kind of, federal investigation, Department of Justice, FBI, someone looking into what has really happened in the background of this case, the people bringing this case, the investigation of this case, the judge, all of it. I truly believe that there is something shady going on, that there is something possibly corrupt and conspiratorial happening behind the scenes. I am not a very conspiratorial person. I like to go off facts, and I just can't understand any of the movements that the officials in this case have made. I am truly disturbed, and I have Richard Allen in my thoughts and prayers as he goes into trial, likely by the end of this week. I'm sorry if my thoughts and opinions on a defendant in obviously a horrific murder trial are offensive to anyone. I hope you can see that when the evidence is overwhelming against someone, when someone is clearly, to the general public's view, guilty of the crimes committed, like in our opinion here, Alexi Treviso, in the Alexi Treviso case, that we are still waiting on a decision to be handed down from the Supreme Court about the evidence in that case. But as we clearly can see the difference between that case and this case, we see that the state in Alexi Treviso's case is extremely transparent. They have given everything over to the defense. They are not afraid of the media. Neither side is afraid of the media. In fact, the defense in that case loves the media, seems. And so, that case is happening on the up and up. There's nothing to be worried about. When the powers that be, so to speak, that are bringing the charges and that have the ultimate judgment over these charges operating in such an odd way, it does call into question that the public needs to look at it with some type of scrutiny, which is why I do really, really commend the YouTubers, the attorneys that are going to this trial, that are, getting up early, waiting outside, and putting in those long days and effort to report back all this information, because it means more than to a lot of people out here who have a lot of hope for true justice to be served in this case, and hope for actual justice to come for these victims, because it does currently feel hopeless, other than the couple of gleaming lights that we got in hearing that Richard Allen looked much better than he did, and that some people are hoping to have stronger evidence than the state is probably going to be able to present in the case. Thank you so much if you've made it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you're interested in following cases like this or the future case or case to trial, please subscribe, because I'll be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's your girl Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.